the Great Smoky Mountains, a place where beauty and danger often blur. Mist clings to the ridges like a veil, hiding secrets older than memory. For centuries, travelers have vanished, here swallowed whole by its endless forest, but none would shake this quiet region more than the story of a father and his young son, who set out for a simple hike one summer morning, only to vanish without a trace. And it would be 5 long years before a drone, flying high above the trees, revealed something no one ever thought possible. The morning of the hike, it was June 14th, 2017. John Willis, 38 years old, was known in his small Tennessee town as a dedicated father, a carpenter by trade, a quiet man by nature. And that morning, he had promised his 9-year-old son, Michael, a day of adventure on the trails of the Smoky Mountains. Michael had been fascinated by the wilderness, books about explorers stacked by his bed, sketches of mountains pinned to his bedroom wall. His father, once a Boy Scout himself, had been planning this trip for weeks. The route was simple, a day hike along Alum Cave Trail, one of the park's most popular paths. No overnight gear, just a backpack with snacks, water, and John's camera. By noon, they'd be back in town for lunch. At least, that was the plan. The last sighting, at 9:12 a.m., a park ranger stationed near the trailhead saw them. The father and son were cheerful, laughing as they signed the trail register. Other hikers later recalled passing them along the path, Michael pointing at birds, John pausing often to take photos. Nothing seemed out of place, but by late afternoon, when they hadn't returned, John's wife, Michael's mother, grew concerned. She drove to the trailhead herself. The family car was still there. By dusk, rangers were notified, and within hours, one of the largest search operations in the park's history was underway. The search begins. The Smokies have a dark history with disappearances. Rapid weather changes, steep terrain, and dense forest can disorient even experienced hikers. That first night, searchers combed the trail with flashlights, calling out names into the darkening woods. Helicopters swept overhead with thermal imaging. But there was nothing, no sign of footprints leading off trail, no discarded gear, no sound of distress. The trail where John and Michael were last seen seemed to simply end. By the third day, more than 100 volunteers had joined. Bloodhounds were brought in, but strangely, the dogs caught a scent near Alum Cave Bluffs, only to lose it entirely within a few hundred feet. It was as if father and son had vanished. Into thin air. Theories emerged. The community, stunned, began asking questions. Did they slip and fall into one of the many hidden ravines? Could they have wandered into the dense brush and become hopelessly lost? Or was something more sinister at play? Some locals whispered about the Smoky Mountain Curse, a legend of spirits said to lure travelers deep into the forest, never to return. Others suggested foul play. Maybe John had enemies no one knew about, but investigators found no evidence of trouble in John's personal life. No debts, no disputes. By all accounts, he was a devoted father and husband. Still, how could 2 people simply disappear from a busy trail without a single witness noticing? A haunting silence. Weeks stretched into months, then years. Every lead dried up. Every new search yielded nothing. The Willis family home remained untouched. Michael's room frozen in time. His favorite books stacked neatly, his drawings waiting for him to return. John's wife refused to move. She told reporters, "If I leave, how will they ever find that way back?" But the truth was, Hope was slipping away. By 2019, the case was considered cold. To most, John and Michael were presumed gone, forever claimed by the mountains, until, in 2022, fate intervened. The drone discovery on a crisp October morning, a forestry drone was sent over the Smokies to survey tree health after a recent storm. It was routine, nothing unusual. But when analysts reviewed the footage that evening, something strange caught their eye. On a rocky outcrop, far from any known trail, the drone's camera had captured what looked like a bright flash of orange, color that didn't belong in the endless green and brown of the forest. Zooming in, they realized it wasn't just a color. It was fabric, torn, weathered, but unmistakably human-made and nearby. A shape that made their blood run cold. The footage was rushed to authorities. Within 48 hours, a new search was launched. For the first time in 5 years, there was hope. A chance that the Smoky Mountains might finally give up their secret. But what they would find in that isolated clearing was far darker than anyone imagined. The call came on October 17th, 2022. 5 years had passed since. John and Michael Willis disappeared into the mist of the Great Smoky Mountains. For half a decade, their case had remained colder. Haunting memory whispered about in town, but never resolved. But now, the forest itself had spoken. A forestry drone sent to survey storm. Damaged had captured footage of what looked like weathered fabric, high on a rocky ridge nearly 5 miles from the nearest marked trail. It was the first tangible lead-in. Years by dawn, a new search was underway. This time, it wasn't just about finding 2 missing hikers. It was about uncovering what had been hidden in the mountains for so long. The search team assembles Ranger Scott Ellison, who had led the original 2017 search, was called out of retirement to join the new effort. He had never forgiven himself for failing to bring John and Michael home. This is the one case, he told a reporter quietly, that still keeps me awake at night. If there's even a chance, I have to see it through. The search team included seasoned rangers, forensic experts, and even 2 FBI field agents. The footage from the drone had raised questions too urgent for local authorities to handle alone, and at the trailhead, silently watching them prepare, was a woman who had lived with grief every single day for 5 years. Sarah Willis, John's wife, Michael's mother. She had begged to join the search herself, but rangers refused. The terrain was too dangerous. All she could do was wait, just as she had waited for years, for answers that never came. The trek to the Saitan, the morning of October 19th. The team began their ascent. The ridge where the drone had spotted the strange fabric was no ordinary spot. It was located off-trail, up near the jagged cliffs of Chimney Topsa, notoriously treacherous section of the park, with sheer drop-offs and dense undergrowth. Even for seasoned hikers, reaching it would take hours of grueling climbing. For an unprepared father and child, it would have been nearly impossible. So how had John and Michael gotten there? The question lingered in every searcher's mind as they pushed through the forest. The first signs by midday. The team had already encountered eerie signs. A torn scrap of synthetic material bright orange, like the one seen in the drone footage, was found snagged on a low branch. Not far from it, a rusted metal object half buried in leaves, a pocket knife. Its blade snapped. But the most unsettling discovery came from the dogs, brought along to track human remains. They suddenly began to whine and bark furiously at a spot near the base of a boulder. When handlers dug through the soil, they uncovered something small, a sneaker, child-sized. Its laces frayed, its fabric worn, but unmistakable. Michael's sneaker, for many, it confirmed what they had feared. The boy had made it this far, but what happened next was still a mystery. Reaching the clearing by late afternoon, the team arrived at the rocky outcrop seen in the drone footage, and there it was, a torn piece of fabric, sun-bleached and battered by rain, clinging to the sharp edge of a rock. Analysis would later confirm it matched the brand of jacket John was wearing the day he vanished. But more disturbing was what lay just beyond. Scattered across the clearing were remnants of what looked like a small camp, a rusted tin can, a collapsed frame of branches that might once have been a makeshift shelter. Charred wood ovens of fire. Someone had been here, and the realization hit hard. John and Michael hadn't simply vanished into the wilderness. At some point, they had tried to survive in it. The journal's forensic teams carefully combed the clearing. One ranger called out. He had found something wedged beneath a rock. A small, weathered notebook, its cover warped by years of exposure. It was John's field journal. Much of it was water-damaged, the ink smeared. But a few entries remained legible. The first was dated June 14, 2017, the very day of the hike. Trail busy, Michael excited. Taking the ridge shortcut. Doesn't look marked, but should lead back quicker. We'll test it. Sun is high. Then 2 days later, lost, food low. Michael scared, trying to keep him calm. Nights cold, heard voices last night, but no one came. And finally, the last entry scrawled hastily, almost illegible. Not alone out here. Something's watching us. Must move. The handwriting was jagged. Desperate, it was the last trace of John Willis ever recorded. The mountains silenced the discovery of the journal, shook the searchers to their core. The father and son hadn't been claimed instantly by the wilderness. They had fought to survive at least for several days. But the chilling words, "not alone out here," raised new, darker questions. Had they encountered another person? Someone living off-grid in the Smokies, hidden from society? Or was John simply delirious from exhaustion and fear? No one could say for sure. But the search team pressed on, deeper into the ridge. Desperate for answers, the bones it was near sunset when the final discovery was made. In a shallow depression at the edge of the clearing, half hidden beneath years of leaves and soil, a searcher uncovered what looked like a rib bone. Within minutes, more followed. A partial skeleton, it was confirmed to be adult, most likely John. The remains were fragile, scattered, as though disturbed by animals. But there was no sign of Michael, not a single bone, not a single trace. It was as if the boy had simply vanished into the forest, leaving only his father behind. Unanswered questions for Sarah Willis. The news was devastating. She had long prayed that if her husband and son could not be found alive, at least they could be found together, that they would be laid to rest side by side. But now the cruel reality was different. John was gone. Michael's fate was still a mystery, and the words from the journal lingered. Not alone out here. Theories reignited as news of the discovery spread. Speculation exploded. Some believed John and Michael had become lost, with John dying in the wilderness and Michael wandering further, never found. Others whispered darker theories that they had encountered someone living in the forest, someone who had taken the boy. A few even suggested something more supernatural, that the Smoky Mountains, with their long history of disappearances, had swallowed the boy whole. Whatever the truth, the forest wasn't giving up its secrets easily. The search for Michael V. Renewed search for Michael Willis continued for weeks after the discovery. Drones combed the skies, dogs swept the ridges. Every cave and ravine within miles was explored, but there was nothing, no remains, no clothing, no signs of struggle, just silence. And in that silence, one haunting truth remained. If Michael had survived beyond those first desperate days, someone or something might still know where he was. The cliffhanger on November 12th, as the final sweep of the season drew to a close. One drone operator reported something strange. Miles from the clearing where John's remains were found, deep in a remote section of the Smokies, rarely visited by man. The drone captured movement, not an animal, but the fleeting outline of a figure. Small, thin, dressed in ragged clothing, it disappeared into the trees in seconds. But for those who saw the footage, one question was immediate. Could Michael Willis still be alive? The Smoky Mountains are like an ancient vault holding in their roots stories that may never see the light of day. For 5 long years, the disappearance of David Holloway and his 12-year-old son, Ethan, had remained one such story. Entire search. Teams had combed the valleys. Bloodhounds had picked up faint traces, then lost them. Rangers had logged the case as unsolved. And the Holloway family was forced to live each day with a haunting silence where laughter once filled their home. But sometimes, the mountain itself decides when it's ready to speak. It began with something so ordinary, it almost seemed too simple to matter. A hobbyist drone pilot, Marcus Reeves, had been documenting fall colors in the Smoky Mountains in late October. His drone swept over ridges tinted with orange, red, and gold. But when his footage was reviewed later that night, a peculiar flash of light caught his eye. Not sunlight, not lens flare, something metallic, almost rhythmic, reflecting from deep inside a gulch where human footsteps rarely wandered. Marcus zoomed in, and there, wedged between jagged rocks and the roots of a chestnut oak, was what looked like a fragment of a camping stove. Rusted, weather-worn, but still recognizable. Marcus wasn't the kind of man to ignore things. He reported the coordinates to park officials, not expecting much. But what came next reignited a case that had gone stone cold for 5 years. The return to the search by dawn. A recovery team had already hiked into the gulch. With them were cadaver dogs, archaeologists from the park's investigative unit, and watching anxiously from a distanced David Holloway's widow, Claire. She had insisted on being there, even if the truth was something she feared more than anything. The gulch was nearly inaccessible. Loose shale slid under every bootstep, and towering cliffs pressed inward like stone jaws, ready to close. Yet, just 20 yards from where Marcus's drone had spotted the metallic flash, a ranger shouted, "Over. Here, I've got something." The crew rushed over. At the base of a boulder, half buried in moss and leaves, was a blue nylon backpack, faded, torn at one strap, but the initials stitched into the fabric, E.H., Ethan Holloway's pack. The air seemed to vanish from the gulch. Even the dogs stopped barking, as if they sensed the gravity of what had been unearthed. Inside the pack were fragments of Ethan's world water-stained comic books, a broken flashlight, and a map that had been scribbled over with childish handwriting. On the map, circled over and over again in red pen, was one word: cave. The hidden trail searchers widened their sweep. It wasn't long before they discovered a nearly invisible trail veering off into the Roxa Trail that had gone unnoticed. 5 years earlier, branches and moss had disguised it so well, only the keenest eyes could have found it. The dogs pulled forward, And after 2 hours of grueling climbing, the trail opened into a natural amphitheater of stone. At its center, a cave mouth, dark and gaping like the maw of some ancient beast. Spray-painted faintly on the rock beside it was a marking no ranger had ever logged before. A crudely drawn spiral. It didn't make sense. Who had put it there, and why? Still, the cave was entered. Inside, the air was damp and heavy. The deeper the team went, the more their flashlights revealed scraps of fabric, gnawed food wrappers, a single rusted knife, and at the farthest corner, a pile of stones that didn't belong, deliberately stacked. With trembling hands, they began to remove them. What lay beneath stopped everyone cold. 2 skeletal remains, one larger, one smaller, positioned not side by side, but as though one had been shielding the other. DNA tests later confirmed it. David and Ethan. The unanswered questions to most. The discovery was closure. A father and son, finally found after years of tormenting mystery. But to those who looked closer, it was anything but simple. For one, the condition of the bones told a troubling story. They bore signs of exposure to extreme cold, malnutrition, and something far more disturbing, fractures that did not align with an accidental fall. Ethan's arm showed a healed break from months before the disappearance. David's ribs showed compression injuries, almost like he had been crushed or beaten. Secondly, the cave itself showed signs of occupation. Charcoal remnants from fires, strange symbols etched into the walls, circles, spirals, crude stick figures. Some fresh enough to suggest they had been carved not 5 years ago, but much more recently. Who else had been inside that cave? Rangers began cross-referencing local records. Whispers surfaced, accounts of survivalist groups, fringe communities, even rumors of mountain hermits who lived in places where law cannot reach. One ranger, speaking only on condition of anonymity, admitted something chilling. We found shoe prints near the cave. Recent ones, too big to belong to David or Ethan. Someone's been going back there, watching. Claire's grief and revelation when Claire Holloway was informed of the discovery. She collapsed into tears. But as weeks passed, grief turned to something else, an easy curiosity. She requested to see the items recovered. Among them was Ethan's water-damaged notebook. Most of the pages were smeared beyond recognition, but on one page, faint pencil marks remained. Ethan's handwriting, it read, "We hear voices at night. Dad says it's the wind, but I don't think it is. They sound like people." Claire froze when she read it. She knew her husband well enough to recognize his handwriting too. On the margin of the same page, David had scribbled a hurried note, "Not alone, someone watching." The theories when the news hit the public, theories exploded. Some believed David and Ethan had simply gotten lost, succumbed to hunger and cold. But others latched on to the disturbing details, the cave drawings, the fractures, the voices Ethan described. Was it possible they had stumbled onto a hidden encampment deep in the Smokies? Could they have encountered people who didn't want to be found, or worse? Had they been kept alive for some time before their eventual deaths? An independent journalist, Rachel Mendez, released an expose suggesting links between the Holloway case and other disappearances in the Smoky Mountains dating back decades. Families, hikers, even hunters, all vanishing without trace, often near areas marked with strange spiral graffiti. The Park Service dismissed her claims as speculation, but hikers who had seen the spirals themselves began sending in photos, proving the symbols weren't isolated. Someone was leaving a trail. The drone footage revisited Months after the discovery, Marcus Reeves, the man whose drone had reignited the search, went back to review his old footage more carefully. And there it was, a frame he had overlooked before, just 3 seconds long. In the far edge of the gulch, partly hidden by shadows, stood a figure, motionless, watching the drone. That the face was obscured by a hood, but the body language was unmistakable. This wasn't a lost hiker. This was someone who belonged there, and they had been watching the final resting place David and Ethan were buried in their hometown that spring. Hundreds turned out. The service was somber, but not without warmth. Stories of David's kindness, Ethan's humor, their bond that had clearly carried them even into their last moments. But for Claire, peace remained elusive, because the real question wasn't just how her husband and son had died. It was what they had stumbled into, and whether whoever or whatever was in that cave was still there today. Hikers are still warned about straying from marked trails in the Smoky Mountains. Officials frame it as safety protocol, cliffs, wildlife, weather. But those who know the Holloway case wonder if there's more to the warning. Every year, new reports emerge of strange sounds in the valleys, of spirals painted where no human hand should have reached, of drones capturing fleeting glimpses of lone figures, standing in silence, watching. The Smoky Mountains keep their secrets. And for the Holloway family, the greatest one is this: did David and Ethan die victims of the wilderness? Or did they stumble into something much darker, something alive, hidden in the heart of the mountain, waiting for the next ones to wander too far? Because sometimes, the scariest thing about the wild isn't nature itself, it's the people who choose to disappear inside it.